Thank you.
Okay. You should probably just move. Okay.
All right. Hey guys, thanks for coming out today. This is the Tech Academy, if you haven't been here before. I work here as an outreach director, but I will be doing a presentation today. Thank you all for coming in. If you have a moment afterwards, we have some surveys, and we'd love to hear feedback about how things went, what you'd like to see in the future, or how you heard about us. It's always very helpful. But that being said, welcome to the introduction to game development. This will be a presentation about the process of game development. I won't go too much into depth or give many demos, but it's just going to be the overarching process. That's me, player one. Okay. As I said, my name is Matthias. Recently worked on a game called Crona, Gnome, and it was for an indie game jam here in town. We had 2 weeks, or it was 1 week, I forget. It's been a while. But we had a very short amount of time to actually develop a whole video game and release it and make sure it works and is fun, relatively fun. It doesn't have to be fun, but it was pretty cool. I did the art, music, and some of the game design elements for it. That was a really good learning process. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. Has anyone played The Legend of Zelda? So we all know this is the very first tool that you get as Link. Some random old guy just gives you a sword because, kids should have swords. That was his thought process. That was an awesome game, and that actually is what kind of inspired me to get into game design and video gaming in the first place. So can anyone tell me what a video game is? Yes?
A virtual simulation of an idea.
Yes, definitely. Virtual simulation of an idea. Definitely. And I would add that there's some interactive component to it. So you are, using some controllers, pressing buttons, and moving things around within this virtual space. Plenty of video games are out there. Some weird ways to play them. This is going to be fun, actually. I'm interested to see where this goes. But that is really immersing someone into a virtual space, putting goggles on and being able to turn your head and move. And this is where it all started. Well, not really, but this was kind of an inspiration for us in making Crona Gnome. You'll probably see a lot of similarities. All right, so you want to make a game. This is the first step that you have to think about. These are some questions to ask yourself. Who's on your team? Are you working on this project solo? So this is going to really give you a lot of control or maybe no control at all over what happens. So it's important to think about the things that you want in a game and the things that other people want to develop, because who's on your team is really going to determine the end result. What your timeline is for completing the game. If you want to make a quick game, then it has to be a very small scope. It has to be super simplified, a couple of buttons, because it's going to be really hard, especially if you're doing this alone, to create all of the different elements of the game. Consider the complexity, what's realistic, and if you have enough time and energy, then you can probably do anything. But that being said, I personally wouldn't want to work on the game of my dreams by myself for 7 to 10 years, because that just sounds like a lot of work. Even if it is the game of my dreams, I want to be more realistic. So I probably would make something, much simpler version of that. So you got to build your team. There are a lot of different parts, and these aren't actually all of the parts of a game design team. If you work for a bigger company, there's going to be art directors, there's going to be sales teams, there's going to be a lot of people that are, extra dependencies that you have. These are just the core people on the team. So this is the kind of layout that we had for our team when we created Crona Gnome. We had a producer. She was overseeing the project, tracked our milestones, liaison with other people. She wasn't really a liaison for us because we weren't selling the game. But this is the person that will actually interact with investors. You know, they'll pitch the game, they'll do presentations on the game, and they're a very important person, even though they don't actually develop much of the content. So we have the designer, which they think about the puzzles, develop ideas for the game, decide the player goals, how you're going to get through the game. If you have an idea, you can't. So you have an idea of how to win, but without the how to get there, it's going to be really hard to actually create. So the designer does that. They build how you're going to get to the end result. The artist is the person that creates all of the assets for the game. They develop style, player immersion, and you want to have an artist who has a, you know, they're kind of gelled with a specific style. They don't kind of go in different places, or if you have a game that's just a bunch of different elements from random websites, then it's not going to immerse the player very well. Although that is an option. Like, there are a lot of games that are just like free art from different places, and they still make a very functional game. But artist is really important in actually developing the style for the game. Programmer, that's obvious. They know all of the back-end stuff. They know how the engine works. They create the logic and loops and all of the algorithms for how the game works. They get to do all the fun physics stuff that us artists don't have to worry about, which is very good. Sound engineer, sound effects, music, voiceovers. Also, they don't always do all of the voiceovers. There's a lot of people that could do voiceovers sometimes. Like our producer was trying to do some voiceovers, and she actually does some really funny voices. Testers, everyone is a tester. Your friends should test the game. Your parents and your dog should all test the game. There are going to be tons of bugs that just one person can't find. Especially if you're developing a game, you kind of like get an idea of how the game plays, and you aren't thinking about all of the weird little like nooks and crannies that you might be able to go into. You're just focused on like point A to point B, and this is how it works. All right, high concept. So this is, once you have a team, this is kind of the next stage. This is where you determine what the game is going to be about. Obviously, this is an important part of development. I recommend pens, sticky notes, whiteboard, open-mindedness, energy drinks, and snacks. You want to be comfortable, but you want to be manic at the same time. So those two definitely help with that. So when coming up with ideas for this game, there's going to be a lot of good ideas, and there's going to be a lot of bad ideas. Good ideas are going to get discarded all the time if you're working on a team. And this is where it's important, you know, determine if you want to work on a team or if you want to work by yourself. If you work by yourself, you have complete control over this. But if you're working with a team, it's going to be very helpful to not attach yourself to some ideas, because if you attach yourself to those ideas and it doesn't work out, you're going to be frustrated, and then you're going to have troubles later on because the game's not taking the direction you want it to go. So being open to where the game is going to go is very key at this point. If you're forming the high concept and your team is kind of breaking apart, then you have to think about, you know, later on, is this going to happen? Like, are we going to actually complete this game? So you want to have some cohesive teamwork. So what we do is, when we were developing this game, it took us like maybe an hour to kind of figure out what we wanted to create. We just sat around a table, got a bunch of sticky notes out, and just started writing ideas. Just tons of ideas. Really simple ideas like, storm the castle, take the treasure back to base, level up your character and fight monsters and beat the boss. And these are all separate ideas, by the way. Find all the matching items before the time runs out. Does that sound like, those sound like any games that you guys know? This one, find all the matching items before time runs out. It's kind of like Bejeweled Blitz. Level up your character by fighting monsters and beat the boss. World of Warcraft, maybe? It's super simple. Like, these are just like core ideas. So don't think too hard, overcomplicate it. This is just like basic concept. Okay. You guys recognize these at all? Yeah? Okay. Let's play a game. Well, not necessarily a game, but let's see who can tell me in one sentence what Minecraft is about.
Build, die, and
Build, die, and create?
create.
Yeah? Leo?
I was just gonna say build stuff.
Build stuff? Yeah, exactly. I would say, like, if you want to get kind of more specific within one sentence, use your environment to progress through the game. Like, that's about it. How about Tetris? Can anyone tell me what Tetris is?
Block.
The objects fit.
Make the objects fit. Exactly. Make the objects fit. Don't touch the top of the screen with the objects. Very simple. And in this stage of the concept, you're not so much concerned with like how you're going to do it. It's just what is going on. So making the objects fit. Get all the little yellow dots. Don't touch ghosts. This one looks complicated. Dark Souls, great game, by the way. If you guys like games, you should play this game. This is the best game. Try to get to the end. It's very hard. You might not be able to do it. First person to the finish line. Destroy the enemy's base. Super, super basic. And then that gives you a core idea that you can build off of. So the concept, once you have that core idea, that's when you start, getting some of these extra pieces like, oh, okay, it's going to be a blocky world. And there's going to be trees and mountains, and it's all randomly generated. Or, we want these ghosts to be different colors, and you can also collect this dot, which makes it so you can eat them. Like, these are other concepts. And that's kind of like genre, user experience, theme setting, core mechanics, concept art, just things so that the game starts to take form and something better to build off of since you have a solid foundation already. So here's some concept art. This is kind of the stage where you're developing the world, trying to figure out what everything looks like. This is kind of what some concept artists will do, is like a very nice painted, it looks very professionally done, like fine art almost. I can really appreciate this art style because I could never do that. But there are other forms of art too, like concept art. This one's a little character. It's got different costumes on, and these are not really the final product, but it's just showing, what the idea for this game is. Could be like a little main character, and maybe in this game you get different sets of gear or something as you're going through the game. Maybe they interact with the world differently. And these kind of like concept art sketches can show a lot about what the game is meant to be. This was for our game. It's a little bit of like, the different items that are in the game, kind of like tree, this mountain structure, which wasn't even in the game at all, is just kind of showing, different colors, the landscape, character jumping. Very basic. So, game design documents. Does anyone in here develop games, by the way? Or make games? You do? Awesome. Have you worked with a game design document or created one? That's perfect. That's in every game project. It's going to make things so much easier if you can create a document that just shows all of the different aspects of the game. The art style, the environment mood, buttons you press, and it's often written before the major production, but as you're producing the game, this could change. So everyone should have access to it and be looking at it just to stay updated on, what the game is, stay on the same page essentially. And oftentimes, you can just use Google Docs, make a normal document, and everyone can access it and change it. Also about game design documents, usually each person in their position will be assigned to a certain part of the document. So the artist will kind of describe what the art style is like, and then the developers can look at that and be like, no, that's not going to work. Like, we can't do this complicated animation. We just need a couple of frames. So they can kind of collaborate in that way. So prototyping, next stage, starting to make a video game now. This is crazy. Testing algorithms, jumping, that's an important thing. If your physics are off, your guy just jumps and then he just keeps floating up. That's the problem with the algorithm. The developer is going to have to address that and make sure he falls. And that could be things like keys that unlock doors or just how the game functions. Placeholder graphics, which I'll show you in a second. Fast changes, easy to implement. This is just creating something that works. You just want to play a game. Following the schedule. Let's see. Yeah, don't implement too much. And then the new ideas that build on already existing mechanics. So if you have some idea for a puzzle, use what's already in the game. See if you can make a puzzle out of that, instead of adding more features. So when we're prototyping, this was kind of what we wanted it to look like, but we didn't have all of these fancy graphics, super fancy. We had little colors, and so when people are working on the art, the developer is not just going to sit there and be like, all right, is your art done yet? When do we get to implement this feature? They're already going to be working on this feature. So this is kind of what our developer was doing over here on the right side. Character was an orange block. Pink was a surface that you could collide with, and blue was something you could walk through. So you kind of work with the developer as an artist, and then you figure out how it's going to work, and then the artist can work around that. So I knew to make these branches like platforms that you could stand on, not weird scraggly ones, because that just would look weird. So it was really helpful to actually see something, a prototype, and then be able to build around that. So at this stage, you have prototype. You're in the main stage of production. Everyone's working, tasks are delegated, and again, this goes back to deciding the scope of your game. If you're working on a large team and the scope is big, then you're going to have a list of tasks that are predetermined. They're just going to hand you tasks and be like, do this way, exactly this way, and don't mess with it. But if you're working by yourself, you can figure out your own tasks and how you want to make the game flow. Assets, programming, compelling story, sound and music, level design, all of it's coming together at this point. And you're going to have design meetings often. You'll do course correction in those design meetings. There's going to be frustrated people because this game's not going the way that they want it to go. And that's when a producer comes in handy, because they're like, this is how we need to do it. They're really good. They have the soft skills to actually bring everyone together as a team. And they delegate the tasks and make sure that everyone's okay doing their task. They know how to do it. If they need any help, then they can help them get the help. And they report the progress. So this is a hectic stage, kind of. Everyone has to be communicative and really open to possibilities at this point. So here's a quick look at just some game engine, or environments. This is Unity. As you can see, There's a bunch of like little assets here. So this is kind of like a program that you would use to create a game. The artist will send you art, and you throw it in the assets, and then on the left side is your hierarchy of all of the different elements that are within the game. So you can see all the stars here, which are probably those little red stars. And then when you select these items, you can kind of mess with them in the script, how they work, what they look like, where they're rendering on the screen, just, the lighting. That's where your tools are going to be on the right side. And this is a very complicated process. Like I said, I'm not going to get into this too deep. This is just a tool that's available. Also, they have Paint open. You can make games with Paint, by the way. Like, that's totally doable. This is a free software too. So if you're using it for yourself, you can make games for free. And I highly recommend downloading it and checking it out. They have some examples that are available, so you can like load up pre-made games and kind of tweak them a little bit to understand how the software works. Unreal is another popular one. They're known for their shaders, like making really like crazy lighting and like intricate little details on their assets. I don't believe that one's free though. Game Maker, this one's fun. This is used for a lot of 2D games that are just like prototypes or, just a simple game that you want to make for yourself. It's easy to navigate, and you still have like the same kind of tools that you would have in those other ones. So once you get your game together, as soon as you have a playable stage, like as soon as you have a level that might work, you need people testing it because you're going to find crazy bugs. It's funny, we actually had like a game-breaking bug that we found on the night of our release, and it was just because like we didn't test it enough or have enough people test it, and we were starting to find like little weird things. Like if you were in a certain place holding a certain thing and you moved a certain direction, everything would just break. And it's like, how are you supposed to find that? Well, with lots of testing, lots of people testing it. So it's good to get some detailed feedback about it. I mean, if your parents play it or your friends, like they probably just want to see something that you made and they're excited for you. But try and get people who understand game mechanics who are like, yeah, if you run into this wall and like you turn around and it just starts pushing you through the wall infinitely, like you start flying away. And then you have, like, no one would be able to tell you that unless they actually knew how to play games and kind of like how those elements work. So don't be afraid to hear what sucks in your game. That's a good thing. Like, you don't want to have a bad game. Even if you're attached to it, it's not a bad thing. Sometimes people just get frustrated. But also, it can be something to laugh about. If someone says your game is really bad and you worked hard on it, like, you could just be like, you don't understand it, really. That's okay. Like, there's a lot of other people that will enjoy it, and that's okay too. Take it with a grain of salt, but also be open to it. Crunch time is awesome. I love crunch time. So this is when like everyone realizes, oh crap, this game is not even close to being done. But you only have like 48, maybe a week. I don't know, 48 hours a week. Depends on the scope of your game, but this is the best time. Everything gets done. And you realize, wow, I should have been working way harder earlier on, but it's okay. This happens. Major projects will often expect that you're working overtime and they're not going to pay you. I've heard that about big game design companies, which is why I don't really want to get into game design like on that scale. Indie games are fun to work on though. They're a lot more laid back. Not everything is going to be fixed or implemented. This is like just the game is working at this point. It's still got a lot of bugs, and that's okay. Refine the things that stick out like a sore thumb. So like I was saying, that game-breaking bug, it was if you were holding a seed above your head and then you walked over a plant that gave you more seeds, it would drop the seeds that you were holding behind this rock, which that wasn't the plan, but it just happened that way, and then you couldn't get the seeds to complete the game. So it was just like, okay, the game is like, you worked 10 minutes to get to this point, and now you're done, and you can't beat the game because of our bugs. But that's okay. It's not the final product or iteration. These things can be fixed, and they will be, but you will have to work to do that. And also do more testing, a lot more testing. If you don't do more testing, these are going to be your developers. Yep, that was our developer. He was literally fixing that bug at the release. So he was like spending half of the release party just working on this bug. And, you know, it worked out, but definitely test. So these are release stages. You've probably seen alpha, beta. Code release is the official like release of the game, and then Gold Master, which sounds like some weird Halo thing, but it's actually just the best, like the most stable platform that you have for the game. These are some of the marketplaces that you can release a game on. Steam, they have a 30-day vetting process, so you have to create an account and tell them that you want to release a game on their platform, and they'll go through this process of, you know, looking at the game and, you know, contacting you, making sure that you're a legitimate person, and they just take 30 days for some reason. Xbox, PlayStation Marketplace, itch.io, which is free to create an account, and you can just release games, any kinds of games that you want to. And you'd actually be surprised how many people use that platform. And you can pitch to investors. I had a couple of friends go to E3 this year, and all they did was bring a prototype of a game that they made in Unity. It wasn't even like a full release. It was just in Unity, and they just pitched to people that they met. That's a great way to actually find someone to develop your game further. And they'll bring a whole team on board too. Like, you can create what you want and then bring it to them, and they'll be like, all right, this is our team. And they'll probably change it too. So you'll have to know that, but that is a possibility. All right, some tools that you can use. These are just a few little ones that I found. Pygame is more of a library. It's not really a development kit, but if you know Python and you want to get into making games, that's a really cool thing to use. Paint.net's free. OpenGameArt, they post a bunch of free art. You can just download their sprites, their texture packs and stuff, and you don't have to know anything about art to actually make a game with good art. Freesound.org, all free sounds. Those are just kind of the main ones. Also, like I said, Unity is free for personal projects, so if you want to get into game design, Unity is a very widely used platform. So this was Crona Gnome. Had a little time-traveling gnome. Can travel between past and present timelines, and the goal of the game is to make that little girl stop crying, which she does until you beat the game. You have to collect these different seeds and bring them back to the garden and go forward in time so that they grow. That was the scope of our game. It's my team. Poor developers. That's game over, guys. Anyone have any questions about this? Yeah.
Where can I find your game?
Okay, that's a good question.
I think it's the same thing.
Right here. Yeah. This is it. So, I don't know. Let's see, jsfeel.itch.io chrononome. I wonder if you can just Google it. There it is. Wow, that's incredible. I've never done that before. But, yep, it's the top one when you search chrononome. Yeah, available on Windows and Mac, I believe. Yep, .app. So obviously, yeah, it says really nice game, just too short. We only have one level, which is collecting these different flowers from around the map, and there's 3 of them. So we've had, I'd say most people beat it in like 15 minutes. My brother's done a speed run in 1 minute and 40 seconds, which is stupid. It's outrageous. We like sat there for hours doing it. But it is free to play, so definitely check it out. Yeah, Crona Gnome. Anyone else? Yeah.
So sort of like your team, like how many people were developers on the team?
So yeah, good question. So we had, let's see, this is our whole team. I think there was 7. Yep, 7 of us. So we had, I can just use my mouse. So this was our graphic designer right here. He did the logo and like the screens where the characters are talking to each other. We had, these guys are developers, and she was another developer, so 3 devs total. I think Lauren worked mostly on like screen transitions, because it's kind of hard when you're developing with other people and working on the same things, because then we're using Git the whole time, so we have to like merge different branches together, and so they all worked on separate pieces. But to answer your question, it was 3 developers. Yeah.
So for like the sounds that you just like gave, the sounds on the internet?
So yeah, we during crunch time, like we only had music. We didn't have any sounds implemented, but that's something that happened after we released it, were the different sounds, which we got like free sounds online. My cousin had a Splice membership, which is like a sample website. They have loops and samples, and that was really useful.
So was it just like 10 sounds, or like probably wasn't that many sounds?
Yeah, it was like there was like a jump sound, hitting the ground, running, and I think that was it. Just like picking up a thing. So.
How did you find your team? Like, how did you get them together?
So there's a group called Pig Squad, and it's Portland Indie Game Squad. They host these game jams. There was like 100 people that you just kind of meet and greet, and then they have different times for like meeting people and then forming a team, coming up with ideas, and then they release you off into the world. So we all met there, and this is my brother. He and I work on art together on games before this, so it was easy to like kind of meet more people that way. But otherwise, if you're interested in making games, I definitely recommend checking them out. But there is this website. Cutting game jams. Oh, it might be on itch. Yeah. So these are all like just random game jams happening.
I've seen this before, but I would like to meet people in real life.
Yeah.
To work with.
Yeah. So I definitely recommend Pig Squad. That's how I met this group, and they also just do like project nights. So they have upcoming events. So they do a lot of gaming events, but they also have like just go to the bar, show people what you're working on, and they can also ask you if you want to join them. That's a good way to get into it. Any other questions, guys?
like that's probably a big portion of the work.
Yeah, so I'd say it really depends on the scope. If there's a lot of assets to make, then more artists are definitely helpful. My brother and I split it up. Like, I did a lot of the backgrounds or assets that you'll jump on, or like ground tiles or big rocks. You know, sort of the elements that are in the world. But he did a lot of the sprites that you interact with that actually have a function, like a seed that you pick up or plant, or like the flowers that you're supposed to collect something from. So we just kind of split it up in different ways. But I'd say, yeah, it really depends. Hope that
It's
answered.
like the last Zelda game where like the map was just like huge projects and like a lot of artists working on it.
Yeah, definitely. Tons of artists, I'm sure. At that point, when it's such a big scale, they have like an art director or multiple art directors that actually give work to the artists and then determine if that style fits the game. And then they tell them to adjust it accordingly. But it definitely is like teams of artists at that point. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out and seeing the presentation. If you have any questions about the school or you're interested in programming, you can talk to me. Also, if you have a minute, I would love to see some feedback. But grab some pizza on the way out. I'm sure there's plenty. And have a good day, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really like this, by the way.
Yes.